So I just walked out of the restaurant, up the hill. I passed Gerry, who was talking to one of his tennis friends at the time. And then after I'd passed Gerry, at the top of the road, I just saw somebody walking across the top of the road. So I was a reasonable distance away from them. And that person was carrying a child.
And you say a person, male or?
Oh, a male.
We have to keep doing everything that we can to find her. Kate and I wish to thank once again all those who have supported us over the past days, weeks, and months.
What if the truth is not what you have been told or shown? Kate McCann was questioned repeatedly by Portuguese police about the disappearance of her daughter, Madeleine, and out of 49 questions, she chose to answer only one. She declined to explain where she searched, what she touched, or why she immediately declared that her daughter had been kidnapped. There was no explanation, no outward emotion, no cooperation. Was this purely on the advice of lawyers, or was she shielding something more serious? When a mother chooses silence in the face of tragedy, is that just a legal defense, or does it become a statement in itself? In this case, silence became her most striking answer. Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please tell me where you saw this video from. I will read it all and spread it to the world. On the night of 3rd of May 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from her family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Her parents, Kate and Gerry McCann, were dining with friends at a nearby restaurant, the Tapas Bar, part of the Ocean Club Resort. That night would go on to be one of the most scrutinized in modern investigative history, not only because of the sudden disappearance of a child, but also because of the strange and inconsistent behaviors that emerged in its aftermath. As police attempted to reconstruct the events of that evening, one thing became evident. The timeline provided by the McCanns and the Tapas 7 was riddled with gaps and contradictions. But even more troubling than the missing minutes was Kate McCann's behavior and her testimony during and after her daughter's disappearance. Were these simply the emotional responses of a mother under extreme stress? Or do the omissions and contradictions carry deeper significance? One of the first contradictions came from something seemingly simple. Was the front door of apartment 5A locked? Gerry McCann said that it was when he last checked on the children. Kate McCann, however, told a different story. She said the door was left unlocked, so they could go in and out more easily during their checks. At first glance, this may seem minor, but what are the implications? If the door was indeed locked, as Gerry claimed, how could an intruder have entered without using force? And if it was unlocked, as Kate claimed, why would the couple also insist that the apartment had been secured for the children's safety? Portuguese investigators saw this as a major red flag. Official files even highlight this contradiction, noting that both Kate and Gerry gave opposing versions of how they entered and exited the apartment to check on their children. This raised serious questions. Was there really a break-in, or was the scene presented to look like one? And if the door had truly been left unlocked, would that not amount to severe negligence? 3 very young children left alone in an apartment that anyone could have entered. Either way, this inconsistency undermined the parents' credibility and planted early seeds of doubt in the investigation. Another troubling element was Kate McCann's immediate reaction upon finding Madeleine missing. According to her own account, when she realized the bed was empty, she did not call out for her daughter or thoroughly search the apartment. Instead, she ran straight out of the apartment to the Tapas restaurant to alert Gerry and their friends. Curiously, she did not use a phone. Phones were available at reception, and the restaurant likely had one, and yet the McCanns' own mobiles had been left inside the apartment. Why would parents, leaving their children unattended, not take their phones with them? Witnesses recalled that Kate burst into the restaurant shouting, "They've taken her!" But why such a definitive statement so early, when she had not even finished searching the apartment or considered other possibilities? This raises another practical question. Why did she not shout from the balcony? The tapas restaurant was close enough to be seen from the apartment. By their own accounts, if Kate had cried out from the veranda, her friends might have heard immediately, avoiding the delay caused by running to the restaurant. Instead, she ran and declared Madeleine had been taken, not that she was missing. Was this the frantic cry of a mother in panic, or did it resemble words chosen in advance? If your child had just disappeared, would your instinct be to stay and search every corner, screaming for help, or to run and declare an abduction straight away? The failure to use a phone, the choice not to call from the balcony, and the immediate leap to the statement, "They've taken her," created a trio of actions that many observers found difficult to reconcile with an unfiltered parental reaction. Perhaps the most perplexing element of all was Kate's role in the search itself. Multiple sources and witnesses reported that she did not actively join in the frantic hunt. Instead, she was said to have sat down on Madeleine's bed and remained motionless while others, the tapas group, resort staff, and even local residents, searched around the resort, looking under vehicles, checking buildings, and walking the beach. Meanwhile, Kate stayed still inside the apartment. Was this simply shock and paralysis, an understandable human reaction to trauma? Or, as some suggest, did she not join the search because she already knew her daughter was not there? In that interpretation, her stillness was not born of despair, but of certainty, because there was nothing to find. When considered alongside the other inconsistencies, the locked versus unlocked door, the absence of a call for help, the rushed declaration of abduction, Kate's passivity in the apartment becomes all the more unsettling. Investigators noted this detail in official reports, and commentators continue to return to it as one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. The contradictions in Kate McCann's behavior may not constitute direct evidence, but together they form a disturbing picture. Individually, each element might be excused as stress, confusion, or panic. Yet collectively, they suggest something more, a version of events that refuses to add up. Instead of becoming clearer with time, the narrative has only grown more ambiguous. What remains is a portrait of a night filled with silence, uncertainty, and unresolved contradictions. A night in which a mother, rather than providing clarity, left investigators with 48 unanswered questions and a trail of doubt that has lingered for over 16 years. Was Kate McCann simply a devastated mother in shock? Or was her silence the most revealing clue of all? When Portuguese police interviewed Kate on 7th of September 2007, they were not expecting a confession. They were seeking answers, basic clarifications, simple recollections, the kind of information any parent might be desperate to provide if their child had gone missing. Yet Kate, faced with 49 questions, refused to answer 48 of them. Among those were the most straightforward, non-accusatory questions imaginable. For instance, did you search inside the bedroom wardrobe? That is a yes or no question, practical and necessary. The wardrobe was in the very room from which Madeleine had vanished. Wouldn't any parent in panic tear through every drawer, every cupboard? Yet Kate gave no reply. The officers then asked, "Can you describe its contents?" To prompt her, they even showed photographs of the wardrobe. This was not speculation or accusation. It was a simple request to describe what was visible in front of her. Still, she said nothing. Why? What might she have feared to confirm? Another basic inquiry followed. Who contacted the authorities? A factual question, verifiable through call records and witness testimony. Why refuse to answer that? Such avoidance gave the impression that even neutral facts were being shielded. One final question was just as simple. Who took part in the searches? Multiple people were present that night. If Kate had joined in, she could have listed names and locations. But once again, she did not answer. This silence became even more suspicious when later testimony suggested that she had not taken part in the initial search at all, but had remained seated on Madeleine's bed while others searched desperately. Even more troubling was Kate's refusal to answer the question, "Did any neighbor offer you help?" According to witnesses, including a woman named Mrs. Fenn who lived in the apartment above, a neighbor did in fact interact with the McCanns that night and even offered assistance. Mrs. Fenn's later public statement described hearing Kate crying out in anguish and offering Gerry the use of her phone. Why then would Kate not acknowledge this interaction? Was it an attempt to distance herself from accounts that might contradict her own version of events? Or was she concerned that the neighbor's recollections could highlight inconsistencies? Then came two deeply personal but non-threatening questions. What was Madeleine's behavior like, and what was her relationship with her siblings? These were designed not to accuse, but to provide emotional and psychological context about the child's life. Any parent might be expected to answer such questions with compassion, even in distressing circumstances. Yet Kate remained silent. Why would a mother not wish to describe her missing daughter? Her nature, her quirks, her bond with her siblings. Wouldn't such details help the world connect with her child, and perhaps aid in finding her? These were not trick questions. They were gentle, factual, human, and still they went unanswered. Was this simply legal advice? Or did the refusal suggest a deliberate effort to withhold even the most innocent details? By not answering these simpler questions, she not only denied investigators the chance to build a clearer picture, but also gave the impression that she had something to hide. In most cases, it is the complex, potentially incriminating questions that suspects avoid. Yet here, Kate would not even acknowledge who had tried to help her or what her daughter's daily relationships were like. Does that not suggest a deeper fear, perhaps not of prosecution, but of contradiction? Could the simplest facts have unraveled a larger narrative? What began as a routine interview became instead a study in silence, a silence that felt less passive and more deliberate, strategic and controlled. And within that silence, investigators believed they could hear resistance and deflection louder than words. What did you see, do, or touch when you entered the apartment? This was perhaps the most crucial question of all. When you walk into a room where your 3-year-old daughter is supposed to be sleeping and discover she is gone, what do you notice first? What do you touch instinctively? These are fundamental questions for any investigation. Yet when asked directly, what did you see? What did you do? Where did you look? What did you touch? Kate gave no reply. She provided no description of the room's condition, no indication of whether the windows were open or closed, no mention of touching door handles, bed covers, drawers, or curtains. Why would such basic details be withheld? This silence erased the possibility of reconstructing her first moments of discovery. Even more troubling, it denied investigators the chance to confirm or rule out forensic evidence such as fingerprints or fibers. Was this simply an act of legal caution, or was it a way of preventing investigators from comparing her account with the physical state of the room? Among the questions she refused, the most revealing were those tied directly to the crime scene itself. These were not speculative or hypothetical. They were grounded in physical evidence, observable facts, and the expected behavior of any parent in crisis. And yet, in each instance, Kate McCann chose silence. That silence extended even to small, but potentially significant physical details, such as the curtain behind the sofa. Why had that curtain been disturbed? Investigators noted that it had been moved in a way inconsistent with natural airflow or ordinary use. Could someone have hidden behind the sofa? Was there an attempt to exit through the window, or was the scene deliberately arranged to give that impression? When asked directly, why was the curtain behind the sofa tampered with? Kate again refused to respond. This was not an accusatory question. It was a simple observation about photographed evidence. By avoiding an answer, she prevented investigators from ruling out scenarios that might have been eliminated. Did she fear revealing knowledge she should not have had? Or was it simply that even this small detail might unravel the version of events she wished to maintain? Investigators also noted Kate's emotional leap in those first moments. Before a search had even begun, before windows were checked or cupboards opened, she made a statement that would define the case. They've taken her. Why did she immediately assume abduction without evidence of forced entry or a full search of the apartment? When asked directly, why did you say from the start that Madeleine had been abducted? She again refused to answer. Was this conclusion emotional, informed, preconceived, or perhaps rehearsed? Most parents would move through stages: panic, frantic searching, denial, hope. Yet Kate appeared to bypass all of them with immediate certainty. Was this simply shock expressed in a single phrase, or something else entirely? Investigators also asked, where did you search for Madeleine? Another vital question. Where did she look, and how? The natural assumption would be that any parent would search frantically, calling their child's name, checking every corner, opening every wardrobe and cupboard. Yet reports suggest that while others, including friends and staff, scoured the grounds and surrounding area, Kate remained in the apartment, sitting motionless on Madeleine's bed. Why not search actively? Was this paralysis from shock? Or was it knowledge that searching would achieve nothing? The oddities extended further. Investigators turned their attention to the twins, two young children who slept through the entire commotion. Why did they not wake during the chaos, the shouting, the frantic running? Even when carried upstairs later, they remained asleep. Police asked, why didn't the twins wake up during the search? Once again, no response. Was this merely a coincidence? Or did it raise the unsettling possibility that the children had been given something to ensure they slept soundly through the night? Both Kate and Gerry were doctors, and Kate had experience in pediatrics. There is no proof the children were sedated, but the silence left the question hanging, uncomfortably unanswered. Meanwhile, the media appeared astonishingly fast. Investigators wanted to know how. Did you call Sky News? They asked. Strangely, by the morning of 4th of May, television crews were already on the ground, and one British newspaper published the story just after midnight, barely 2 hours after Kate had first reported her daughter missing. Was this mere coincidence, or evidence of early contact with the press? If media were contacted before or immediately after police, does that not suggest an unusual focus on controlling the narrative? Again, Kate did not respond. One final question carried a particularly haunting weight. Did you ask for a priest? Reports indicated that a local priest was indeed contacted early, and that the McCanns were even given keys to the village church. An extraordinary privilege. Why does this matter? Because rumors circulated that Kate may have confided something under the seal of confession, something a priest could never repeat, even to police. One priest reportedly told a confidant he would take her words to the grave. Why seek out a priest so quickly? And why refuse to explain that request? This may all be hearsay, yet Kate's refusal to answer this question allowed it to take root and spread. Then came the testimony of Jane Tanner, Kate's friend and dinner companion that night, whose account could have supported the abduction theory, But even there, Kate withheld confirmation. Did Jane Tanner tell you she saw a man carrying a child? Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 7, said she saw a man carrying a child away from the apartment around the time Madeleine was believed to have gone missing, and this claim became central to the abduction narrative. Yet when police asked Kate directly, "Did Jane tell you that night she saw a man with a child?" she declined to answer, and this was not a technical query, but a question about a friend's eyewitness account that, if true, could have reinforced Kate's own version of events. So why not confirm it? Did she doubt Jane's story, or fear that acknowledging it might expose further inconsistencies? Through it all, 8 critical questions tied directly to the crime scene, the timeline, and the behavior of everyone involved were met with silence. And out of 49 questions, Kate McCann answered just one. Are you aware that by not answering the questions, you are jeopardizing the investigation which seeks to discover what happened to your daughter? Her response, yes, if that's what the investigation thinks, offered no apology, no sorrow, no plea to help, just a conditional acknowledgement whose language felt distancing and unemotional, shifting the burden back to investigators and subtly challenging their authority. From a psychological perspective, does a refusal to engage with the most tangible questions not speak volumes? Because parents of missing children, particularly those entirely uninvolved, usually want to be cleared quickly and to assist actively in the search. Yet Kate's silence appeared precise and controlled, legally cautious perhaps, but also profoundly unsettling. And in criminal psychology, silence can be a shield, but it can also be a mirror. What does it reflect here? A narrative that struggles when questioned, a version of events that cannot withstand sustained scrutiny. As the questions Kate McCann refused were not designed to trap her, but to find her daughter, and by not answering them, she did more than stall an investigation. She reshaped it. As investigators dug deeper into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, they began to look beyond what was said and focus on what was not. Silence, inconsistencies, and behavior that challenged instinct formed a troubling backdrop, and among the most overlooked yet revealing anomalies was something cold, clinical, and technical: the phone records. The data, specifically from Kate McCann, contained gaps, erasures, and missing links in a timeline where every second mattered. And those gaps appeared not at random, but precisely when the stakes were highest. According to published case documents, Kate McCann deleted the majority of her call history after arriving in Portugal on the 28th of April 2007, which raised eyebrows on its own. But the real alarm sounded on 3rd May 2007, the night Madeleine disappeared. Between 11:14 p.m. and 11:17 p.m., Gerry McCann placed 4 separate calls to Kate's mobile phone, just over an hour after she had raised the alarm, and of those 4 calls, 3 were deleted from Kate's device, while only 1 remained, with no official explanation provided, and later a refusal to discuss her phone activity with Portuguese police. People delete calls for many reasons, privacy or tidying among them. But in a high-stakes investigation involving a missing child, any deletion within minutes of the incident becomes deeply suspect. Why remove 3 out of 4 calls made within a 3-minute window? Why delete any at all? And why those specific ones, especially when the timestamps, 23:14 to 23:17, place them right after the period in which Madeleine was believed to have vanished? By their own account, Kate discovered her daughter missing at approximately 10 p.m., then ran to the Tapas bar to alert Gerry and friends, and the group began searching. Yet nearly an hour later, Gerry was making multiple calls to his wife. Was she separated from the group at that point? Were they discussing how to handle the situation? Was someone else with her, or speaking through her phone? And most importantly, what was said that compelled her to erase the records? Because those deletions deprived investigators of a potential key to understanding those critical minutes. And if the content was innocent, logistics, panic, urgent coordination, why not leave the calls intact? The mystery deepens when stepping back one day to 2nd May 2007. Kate received a call from an unidentified number in Swansea, United Kingdom, which she later said was a wrong number, a harmless misdial. Yet this was one of the few calls she did not delete, and in fact nearly every other call was removed except this one. Why keep this if it meant nothing? According to research published on the Jill Haven forum, a call was also placed that same day from a mobile number registered in Praia da Luz to that same Swansea number, meaning a line in Portugal called the very number that had called Kate. It is important to note that the Praia da Luz number did not belong to Kate, Gerry, or any of the Tapas 7, and its owner has never been identified. It was not connected to the Ocean Club Resort, local police, or medical services. Portuguese police, aware of the odd link, asked British authorities to help identify the owner, and to date, no match has been publicly disclosed. So, what do we have? The day before Madeleine went missing, a number in Swansea called Kate McCann, and that same day, a number in Praia da Luz called that exact Swansea number. A triangular link, a closed loop, without a clear explanation. Kate said the Swansea call was a mistake, but if so, why save it? Why not delete it along with the others? And why preserve a supposedly meaningless call while erasing 3 calls from her husband on the night her daughter disappeared? Does this not raise the possibility that the Swansea Praia da Luz connection involved a third party outside the family, yet connected behind the scenes? Was this an accidental trail left behind, or part of a plan? One of the strongest red flags in any inquiry is selectivity, deleting only some data while leaving other pieces intact, which signals conscious choice. Kate did not wipe the entire call log. She selectively removed calls with high contextual importance, those from her husband immediately after the disappearance, while keeping a call from a stranger she said was irrelevant, a pattern inconsistent with routine tidying for privacy or convenience, and suggestive of something more deliberate: information management. Had she wanted to avoid scrutiny entirely, she could have erased everything and said she could not remember. But by deleting only select calls, she created a pattern, and with it, suspicion. According to statements cited in the case files, on 3rd of May, 3 of the 4 calls from Gerry McCann, between 23:14 and 23:17, were deleted from Kate's mobile, which suggests an intention to conceal information. This is not a journalist's claim or a forum rumor, but a detail recorded in the official Portuguese investigative dossier. Was Kate McCann's phone behavior innocent or more deliberate? Because there are 2 opposing readings of the deletions. A charitable view that she routinely cleared her history for privacy, and that the Swansea call was truly a wrong number, and a darker view that the selective deletions and preserved anomaly point to purposeful curation at a moment when every second and every call mattered. And in the chaos and trauma of losing her daughter, perhaps Kate gave little thought to what was worth keeping or erasing. But is that explanation enough? The more suspicious interpretation is harder to ignore: that she deliberately removed specific calls, ones that might have captured panic, coordination, or even planning. The Swansea number, especially when linked to a mysterious call from Praia da Luz, points towards a third party never publicly identified. And what about the pattern itself? The calls kept versus those erased. It suggests selectivity, as if only what was safe was left behind and what was not was carefully removed. Taken in isolation, these actions could be dismissed, but when placed alongside her refusal to answer 48 out of 49 police questions, her absence from the initial search, and her inconsistent statements about details as basic as locked doors and moved curtains, do the phone deletions not begin to look less like oversight and more like concealment. In the end, they read like the digital equivalent of staying silent. But why erase anything at all? If there was nothing improper, no questionable conversations, why delete? And why, of all calls, preserve one from a supposed stranger? Why keep a single call from her husband while erasing the rest? Does a mother desperately trying to find her child treat her phone log like a manuscript to be edited? If the priority is to recover a missing daughter, wouldn't every trace, every timestamp, every detail be welcomed as evidence? Instead of opening everything to scrutiny, it looks curated, as if some things were not meant to be seen. Kate McCann's conduct throughout the investigation has often been described as silent, distant, even evasive. Her refusal to answer questions drew headlines, but silence is not only verbal, it can be digital too. Deleting a phone call is like saying the conversation never happened. In an inquiry, each missing detail leaves behind a shadow. Phone data cannot prove guilt, but nor can it establish innocence. What it does reveal is a portrait of selective memory, deliberate concealment, and choices made with calculation rather than impulse. And in a case where a child vanished without a trace, do not even the smallest traces, left behind in a phone, speak volumes? Sometimes what is missing says more than what remains. In high-profile missing person cases, there always comes a stage where facts run thin. Witnesses grow uncertain, physical evidence fades, and every word or silence must be examined, not just for what it says, but for what it avoids. It was at this point that Peter Hyatt entered. Hyatt is a professional statement analyst, a specialist in linguistic forensics. For over 2 decades, he has studied criminal investigations, cold cases, and media interviews, decoding the language of suspects, witnesses, and victims. His approach is not mystical, nor speculative. It is systematic, rooted in behavioral linguistics and human psychology. According to Hyatt, the truth has a rhythm, and so does deception. By analyzing how people speak, and more importantly, what they avoid saying, we can uncover patterns otherwise invisible. When Hyatt turned to the Madeleine McCann case, he was not working for police. He had no authority, no access to classified evidence. What he had was an interview, a transcript, and his method. At the core of statement analysis lies an examination of language. Word choice. Does the speaker use distancing language or vague phrasing? Pronouns. Do they take ownership with I or diffuse responsibility with we? Verb tense. Do they shift between past and present unnaturally? Omissions. What is conspicuously absent that should be there? And narrative shifts or repetition that betray stress. Hyatt emphasizes that this does not tell you what happened. It reveals whether a speaker believes what they are saying. In 2011, Kate and Gerry McCann sat down for a televised interview in Australia. 4 years had passed since Madeleine's disappearance, and the public was still divided. Were they grieving parents, or were they maintaining a carefully managed image? Hyatt watched not as a journalist or detective, but as an analyst. He was not in the room. He did not ask the questions, but he had their words. As he dissected the interview, several red flags emerged. One of the first was how they handled direct references to Madeleine. When asked about her disappearance, they often shifted to the investigation, media perception, or legal challenges. Was this not an example of emotional avoidance? A mother speaking about a missing child usually shows visible strain when recalling memories, especially if she believes the child is alive. But Kate and Gerry's words showed a calm detachment. Was it composure, or was it distance? Hyatt also noted their pronoun usage. When discussing decisions, checking the children, choosing to dine out, searching afterwards, they consistently said, "we." Even in contexts where individual actions were clear, This collective phrasing blurred responsibility. Instead of saying, "I checked on Madeleine," it became, "We were checking on the children." Was this, as Hyatt suggested, an attempt to dilute accountability? Perhaps the most striking omission was the failure to say the simplest truth. Madeleine is missing. Hyatt observed that Kate never directly stated it. Instead, she spoke in phrases like, "since that night," or "when everything happened." Was this a form of psychological distancing, denial, or something more deliberate? Finally, Hyatt highlighted the absence of raw emotion. The speech cadence was steady, tone measured, expressions composed. While grief manifests differently, the mismatch between subject and delivery was striking. "If your daughter was gone and you believed she was alive," Hyatt argued, "you don't speak like a spokesperson, you speak like a parent." Based on his analysis, Hyatt suggested a hypothesis echoed by others, that Madeleine may have died in the apartment, perhaps accidentally, waking and falling, or through over-medication, something both parents, being doctors, would have had access to. He stressed this was not about intentional harm, but a tragic event followed by a decision to cover it up. He acknowledged a darker possibility too, but stressed it was speculation rooted in language, not physical evidence. Still, he believed the deflection, detachment, and omissions warranted deeper investigation into every possibility. Importantly, Hyatt's analysis is not legal evidence. His findings are not admissible in court. They are not proof of guilt. They are tools for highlighting inconsistencies, a psychological lens best used with forensic data, timelines, and witness testimony. Critics argue that language is too fluid, shaped by culture, class, personality, even trauma, to serve as a reliable diagnostic. Others suggest Hyatt himself may inject bias. And defenders of the McCanns note that shock and exhaustion can distort speech patterns. A grieving parent may avoid direct language not out of guilt, but because the truth is too painful to say. So, are Hyatt's conclusions insightful, or are they over-interpretation? Either way, his analysis remains among the most widely circulated independent assessments of the case. Why? Because in the absence of hard evidence, words become evidence. In cases like this, where grief and guilt can wear the same face, and where the line between victim and suspect blurs, language itself becomes the battleground. Did the McCanns lie? Did they lose control of their own narrative? Or did they rehearse a story to survive a truth they couldn't bear to face? We may never know for certain. But as Peter Hyatt reminds us, truth is not only revealed by what people say, it can also be uncovered in what they refuse to say, in the pauses, the pronouns they choose, and the facts and names they avoid. In a case defined by mystery, contradictions, and silence, could it be that the most valuable clues lie not in what we see, but in how we listen? In every unsolved case, especially one as globally dissected as the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, speculation fills the void that evidence cannot reach. As time passes and hard leads evaporate, theories emerge not only from facts, but also from behaviors, omissions, and the silences that follow. Some of these theories are far-fetched. Others, while still speculative, are grounded in behavioral patterns and circumstantial logic. One such theory focuses not on whether Kate McCann harmed her daughter, but on a quieter, more haunting question. What if she knew something and could not say it? Among the more measured and widely circulated theories in independent circles is the belief that Madeleine may have died accidentally inside the apartment, and that Kate, possibly with Gerry's help, concealed the truth out of fear and panic. Could it have been a fall while trying to find her parents in the dark, an accident while climbing from the bed, or perhaps an adverse reaction to sedation, a possibility that has been raised more than once? Both Kate and Gerry were doctors, with Kate's background including anesthetics and pediatrics. She understood dosage, reaction, and risk. In this version of events, Madeleine's death was not intentional, but tragic and unexpected. Yet the response that followed, an alleged decision to stage an abduction, was conscious and deliberate. Supporters of this theory argue that fear played the greatest role. Fear of being accused of negligence, fear of losing their twins, fear of professional disgrace, and fear of prison. Under Portuguese law, negligence leading to a child's death could bring severe consequences, including the removal of parental custody. Could that unbearable prospect explain a desperate decision to create a cover story? An open window, a curtain described as blowing, a narrative rehearsed and repeated. While unproven, the theory has endured because no intruder was ever identified. No signs of forced entry were confirmed, and no reliable sighting of Madeleine exists after 9:00 p.m. that night. And if that is true, does silence itself become the most powerful clue? A darker variation has also been discussed, particularly by Hyatt, who emphasizes that his conclusions come from linguistic analysis, not physical evidence. He suggested that avoidance of Madeleine's name, the lack of emotional alignment in speech, and the overuse of collective responsibility might indicate something more troubling than an accident. Could it point towards abuse, not necessarily by the parents, but possibly within their wider circle of trust? There is no forensic proof of this claim, and it remains one of the most disputed aspects of independent commentary. Yet, Hyatt's underlying question still resonates. Why do Kate and Gerry speak in ways that suggest something deeper, yet never name it? Another layer of speculation is more political than personal. Some argue that protection may have come from networks of influence rather than family alone. Clarence Mitchell, the McCann's media spokesperson, had previously been Director of Media Monitoring for the British government, a role closely tied to controlling narrative for the Prime Minister's office. Gerry McCann, too, has been rumoured, though never proven, to have links to Freemasonry. And one curious moment added fuel: a bouquet of flowers left at a memorial for Madeleine, signed by the Grand Priory Knights Templar, a group historically associated with Freemasonry. Even more unusual was the involvement of Prime Minister Gordon Brown, who reportedly maintained personal contact with the McCanns and applied pressure on Portuguese authorities during critical stages of the case. Was this simply compassion from a leader, or an example of political influence reshaping a criminal investigation? And if Kate did know something terrible had happened, could she have been persuaded, even warned, into silence? The evidence of state-level involvement is not only speculative, but documented. After the McCanns were declared formal suspects by Portuguese police, the British government arranged for their immediate return to the UK on a private EasyJet flight. From then on, all future questions had to be submitted through the Home Office and filtered by their legal team. Portuguese investigators later reported that warrants stalled, interrogation paths were blocked, and media narratives shifted almost overnight. Did the case stop being about a missing child and instead become about protecting reputations? Was it compassion, damage control, or something else entirely? At the heart of these theories lies one simple but devastating question: what if Kate knew? And what if she wanted to speak but couldn't? There are many reasons why silence might have prevailed. If Madeleine died by accident, Kate may have feared negligence charges, the loss of her medical career, and most of all, the removal of her twins. If the tragedy involved someone else, exposing it could have destroyed her family or implicated powerful people. If Gerry knew more than he admitted, loyalty to her husband might have kept her silent. And if political or institutional actors stepped in, then perhaps she was convinced that silence was not just the safest choice, but the only one. Psychologists call this paralysis trauma freeze, the state where fear of the consequences overwhelms the natural impulse to tell the truth. Was Kate's silence not passive at all, but calculated, protective, deliberate? Today, Kate McCann remains a deeply polarizing figure. To some, she is a devastated mother who became a target of tabloids and online speculation. To others, she is the keyholder of a truth never spoken. But at the heart of every theory lies the same unease. Her behavior has never matched the script of innocence. Her deleted calls, her refusal to answer questions, her inconsistent accounts of basic details, doors, curtains, timelines. Are these the traits of a parent desperate to solve a mystery, or the signs of someone avoiding one? Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or was it something else entirely? But if Kate McCann knew what happened to her daughter and stayed silent, then the tragedy of Madeleine is not only that she vanished, it is that the one person who might have told the truth chose not to, and that, above all, may be the heaviest burden any mother can carry. From the moment Madeleine McCann disappeared, her mother Kate became the center of global attention. Was she, to the press, the public and the authorities, a grieving parent or something more complicated? And over time her image fractured into three lenses, each offering a different interpretation of who she was and what her silence meant, each adding fuel to one of the most polarizing missing child cases in modern history. In the early days, the British press, especially the tabloids, portrayed Kate as anguished and devastated, her holding Madeleine's soft toy with hollow, reddened eyes on front pages across the country. Fragile and close to collapse, sympathy poured in, and donations flooded the Find Madeleine Fund. Yet as days turned into weeks and no new leads emerged, the narrative shifted, subtly at first, then with ruthless momentum. Headlines began to probe her emotional responses. Why didn't she cry on camera? Why so composed? Why not seen actively searching in the hours after the disappearance? And these questions began to replace the original sympathy as tabloids, such as the Daily Mail, ran suggestive lines. Was it the parents? And the Sun followed with claims about sedation. Did the McCanns sedate their children? So the media prized into every detail of Kate's demeanor, turning expressions, or their absence, into public suspicion. What emerged was a public image split in two. On one side, those who defended her as a mother, enduring the unimaginable, and judged for not displaying the right grief, a victim twice over. And on the other, those who believed emotional restraint signaled control or even concealment, seeing performance rather than pain, calculation rather than collapse. That divide widened as analysts scrutinized not just what Kate did, but what she did not do. On the night Madeleine disappeared, multiple witnesses said Kate did not participate in the search, while others combed the resort, ran to the beach, and knocked on neighbors' doors. Instead, she remained in the apartment, seated on Madeleine's bed. Is that shock or avoidance? And in the days that followed, she refused to answer 47 out of 48 formal questions put by Portuguese police, simple factual queries about her actions, memories, and the crucial hours were met with silence. She often deflected responsibility through collective language. What we did when I would have revealed more. And she rarely mentioned Madeleine by name, and when she did it was often without emotional weight. Statement analysis specialist Peter Hyatt observed, "She does not mislead by inventing words. She misleads by not saying the things that need to be said, focusing on evasiveness, emotional distance, and shifting agency, traits he argues are common when information is being withheld or a version of events is being constructed. Yet these behaviors, however suspicious, never produced a conviction. Kate McCann has never been formally charged. She was, for a time, an arguida in Portugal, but that status was lifted for lack of sufficient evidence. No forensic proof linked her to Madeleine's disappearance. No confession, no eyewitness, and yet the suspicion never fully faded. Gonçalo Amaral, the original lead detective, has publicly maintained his belief that Kate and Gerry McCann were involved in concealing their daughter's death, publishing a book asserting that Madeleine died in the apartment and that an abduction was staged to mask an accident. And although the McCanns sued Amaral for defamation, the Portuguese Supreme Court ultimately sided with him on the right to publish his theory based on available case material. This did not declare Kate guilty, but it affirmed that the theory had legal grounds to exist, leaving Kate in a strange limbo. Legally innocent, publicly doubted, behaviorally ambiguous. How then should her silence, avoidance, and control be interpreted? Fairness demands both sides. Silence does not equal guilt. Trauma manifests differently. Some mothers scream, others go numb. And it is possible her calm was the result of severe shock, or that her refusal to answer was legal advice, rather than deception. Perhaps she sought to protect herself, not to hide something darker. And the world does judge women, especially mothers, harshly when grief is not displayed to expectation. But equally, silence paired with contradictions and missing information becomes more than a coping mechanism. It begins to resemble a wall built and guarded. Kate's quiet was not momentary, but consistent. Not limited to media appearances, but extending into police interviews, courtroom affidavits, and public moments. And that consistency, coupled with emotional distance, created an image many found too calculated, too rehearsed, too precise to be accidental. So is it simply the silence or the architecture around it? Ultimately, the case of Madeleine McCann remains unsolved, and so does the mystery of her mother. Was Kate a woman broken by tragedy and caught in the machinery of public opinion, or a mother who knew more than she ever dared to say? The truth may never be known, but the questions persist because in cases like this, silence is not an answer. It is a presence, and sometimes it is the loudest one in the room. 16 years have passed since the night of 3rd of May 2007. The Ocean Club apartment in Praia da Luz has long been cleaned, repainted, and relet. The headlines have faded, and news cycles moved on. Yet the quiet, persistent questions have never gone away. Kate and Gerry McCann were never charged. No remains were ever found. No suspect has stood trial, and still this disappearance remains one of the most scrutinized and polarizing in the world. There have been media spectacles, private investigations, state-level interventions, and countless theories, but no closure. What remains are loose threads, pieces that never fit, and questions that neither PR nor legal counsel could fully silence. If Kate and Gerry were truly innocent, why not answer simple, factual questions? Why did Kate refuse to say where she searched? Why could she not describe what she saw, touched, or felt in those critical minutes? Why delete phone records that might have retraced their steps? And while silence in grief is understandable, silence at key investigatory moments, strategic, repeated, and consistent, feels harder to explain. And if they were guilty, how did they walk free? How did an entire system, police, politicians, legal authorities, media professionals, fail to uncover the truth? Was it a failure of evidence, a failure of will, or a choice somewhere to protect image over investigation? And then the final haunting question still seen on posters and heard in vigils. Where is Madeleine McCann? Because that question has never been truly answered. Not in courtrooms, not in interviews, not in documents stamped by police or sealed by governments. The world has heard theories and arguments, defenses and denials. But what we have not heard clearly, openly, and without deflection, is the truth. Perhaps the truth was lost that night. Perhaps it was buried in panic, shielded by fear, or protected by influence. Or perhaps it survives still, not in what was said, but in what was not. In the end, we leave this story where we found it, full of unknowns, not to accuse or to judge, but to remember that in the silence of this case, something still speaks. And perhaps the most important question is not what happened that night, but who still dares to ask. So how does this case make you feel now? Do these developments strengthen your belief in one explanation or another? If you were in the family's position, would you call for a fresh, independent review, or accept that some mysteries resist resolution? What would you do next? Sign a petition, share the story, demand answers. And most of all, what do you believe truly happened to Madeleine McCann?